Welcome back to Chris and Retro, and happy 4th of July again. I just did a video talking about reacting to a Sean Strickland video, and in the intro to that, I was intending to cover this subject matter. But as I got more involved in that video, it took a little bit more, and I think it was going to be a little convoluted, and I felt this needed some dedicated conversation. So it's 4th of July, and 4th of July for my family means something a little bit more in that my parents, this is their anniversary, and 53 years is their anniversary today. And it was for my mom, it's her second marriage. My dad is one and only. So first of all, that in and of itself, I've talked about on the show before. My father is a very loyal man. He sees things through. He makes promises. He keeps them, and those things. And it's been a really good model for me. Even though I got my life sideways for a while, my dad still has been, you know, pretty much a shining star of how men should behave, in my opinion, especially towards women. Today, though, is kind of interesting. Is like, what makes a marriage work for 53 years? First of all, we're not in a society right now that even applauds that. And I'm not sure what a 53 marriage would take for me. I've had a bunch of relationships that haven't really worked out real well. The longest I made it was 12 years. And so I don't know what it's definitely, I'm the common denominator. I'm not sure what it would take to make 53 years. But I look at my mother and father, and a lot of how they were raised. My mother is a hardworking woman, always has been. She was raised on a farm and also worked, through divorce and raising a young man and all this other stuff. And my brother, as a teller, I mean, she got her own house. It was a small house, but when she met my dad, they got it all paid for. My dad's been working on that for years, but they just never extended themselves way beyond. But they've lived a nice life together. They've always been. My dad was in printing, and he was in the Army for a while. Then he went into mason work. Then he was an ambulance worker. Then he went into mason work. Then he was in printing, and that, and so on. That's how his life's been. But they've lived a good life together. And as I look back and I consider, well, first of all, I called my dad this morning. I said, happy anniversary to him, and he's like, oh yeah, I forgot. So I guess key number one is don't keep the score. apparently, if you count 53, maybe it doesn't work. Especially if you start counting after one. But anyway, he had forgotten. So apparently I saved my dad there. But as they get older, we were having a conversation this morning. As they get older, it's more of a struggle. One of the comments he made this morning is, it's not as easy just to pick up and go do something as they used to do. And, I could see how that'd be difficult. In my life, I have driving limitations. It's been this way for about 6 years. Hopefully next year, things get better for me on that situation, but it can be very claustrophobic when you don't feel like you have a lot of options to get out and around. And especially for my mother and father, who have always been people that would just get up and go do something. So it makes you wonder, what challenges that places, health considerations and things along their lives. But it's funny to me as I look back, we're so hell-bent on society right now, making everything seem like such a free-for-all, because we were so hell-bent on making sure that we show our individuality that we must do something so massively extreme that it's just us being our individuality, being individual. That makes no sense to me, because I find that the uptick of all that behavior happened after a pandemic when we were isolated for 2 years and mental health issues were known to be prevalent. But yet out of that, we have transgender fights and all kinds of craziness that is just not just small scale. It's now become the predominant conversation that we must deal with all this stuff and must accept all and an ever increasing number. But yet a 53-year marriage is just kind of like, well, that's nice. That's what they used to do. But I would challenge that, because even in that marriage, there was some independence and individuality about their relationship, even though the construct stayed within what we would consider a traditional family construct. But it was a second marriage. It was my dad's first marriage late in his life. It wasn't the first woman my dad was around. It wasn't the first man my mother was around. They lived their life. My dad was a soldier, and then he wasn't one. I mean, all that comes that's a life that he lived. So they didn't have like you go to the local church, you go to the wedding, you get married, then you go off and you have 17 kids. It wasn't that. So how does it last 53 years, even starting in more at that time, probably more of a progressive stance? What's funny to me is like the big joke is that my dad never asked her to marry him. It's been a joke, but it seems to be holding the test of time. They never really remember a proposal. They just kind of showed up and got married. It's the joke, but nobody really understands what were the chain of events that led to today's the day we're getting married. First thing, everything that made me, laugh about it is just like even how they interact with each other. So my mother had a pretty good fall here. We live in a split level townhome, and we're about a bunch of steps in the first top level. She made about 3 steps down, slipped the other day, and fell. It was pretty scary. My dad had a hold of her arm. She didn't fall, like hit her head or anything, but he was kind of holding her up, but not, he wasn't really holding her too much. And she hit the bottom pretty hard. And it was scary. I ran down the stairs, looked like, just make sure she's okay. She's a tough woman for sure. And, she's always making comments like, did you see him push me? Just that's their relationship. Even in like a situation where she could be really hurt, she's more concerned about, what other people are thinking about the situation than it is about her actual injury. And my father then afterwards picks on her about it too. But again, that relationship is real. It's authentic. And I think that's the thing I would take away from it, is they're authentic with each other. They have had their times over life. There's been times when there's been challenges. When they were first married, there was some controversy over some stuff with a female that I don't know if she had a thing for my dad or what, or they had a short relationship or whatever it was, but she wasn't crazy about mom and dad getting married, and she started a bunch of stuff. So there was all these drama situations that were all around that were consistent with today too. So why is it that today all of a sudden it means you got to blow up and be crazy about things, but back then it held to a 53-year marriage? Well, I would say there's a few things that probably played out. One is my dad will always attest to it. My mother will too. God. I believe that the relationship with God and how the relationship has been coexisting with that belief system has made a huge difference in their lives, especially going through a season with me. I was such a stress on their relationship. I was such a stress on their life on all capacities that without God being present in their life, I'm not sure I'd have been better and been saved. I don't think would have been able to deal with it better without the faith and knowing that God had me under control when they couldn't. So I think their faith has been a huge part of their relationship. The second thing has been their acceptance of who they are. They accept each other for who the other person is, and they accept themselves for who they are. My dad knows what he is. My mom knows what he is. My dad knows what mom is. My mom knows what she is. And they exist with each other with an understanding of who each other is. Now, it's not some like, oh, let's sit down and talk about a thing. They have their battles. They do battle and they're grumpy with each other and things like that. But it works because there's no pretense. There's no expectation otherwise. I look at this whole relationship and I look at what the example they provide is loyalty. Their grandkids adore them. Their kids adore them. We see them as just very stable people and we love them tremendously. They provided the hierarchy that allowed a lot of other storms to settle because they were settled. They provided substance and balance. So for you and my audience that may not have that substance and balance like that I was fortunate to have, that gives me some kind of a stability ground to go back to, be it for somebody else. Cause it and enable it for other generations. Cause it and enable it for those around you. Their relationship, I'm not saying write out bad relationships. I'm not saying just exist in life. By all means, life is short. Enjoy your life. But if you find yourself in a relationship or you find yourself in a circumstance where you can be the anchor be the anchor, be there for generations after you, to understand how to get through tough times and make things better. My parents have certainly done that, and I'm happy anniversary to them on 53 years today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I wanted to make sure I shared a little bit of thoughts about my family, a big celebration for them, how important the way they've handled themselves through their lives has been in my life. And, I'm not wishing, 53 years of marriage on anybody based on my own experiences. If any of my relationships had lasted 53 years, I'm not sure how that would have worked for me, or them for that matter. But, strive for stability, be loyal. The relationship doesn't have to be the anchor. In this case, they were an anchor. Look at it. You don't have to do something extraordinary to be noticed. Stick with the honorable things like accepting people as they are. Be loyal to those around you. Provide stability and anchoring to the young and the youth. Provide guidance for them so they can actually prevent some problems that we've faced. Be those things. Help people get ahead of themselves rather than degrading each generation in an exponential way. Stop freaking putting this thing in the floor and crashing this plane. Let's stabilize and provide some stability. I'm not saying traditional values. I'm not saying you have to go back to a church and you have to have, one couple. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying let's provide some stability rather than having everything be chaos in a fight. And I'm telling you right now, for the liberal audience that's watching this thing, if you're telling me that it's the conservatives picking all these fights, you're lying. You're lying, because I think both sides are guilty of picking these fights, and I think it's doing nothing but damaging the next generation. How about we calm down for a minute and recognize those fights that actually even make sense to pick? And how about we actually just come together, recognizing we are being divided as a nation, and let's start with loyalty to each other. Let's accept each other for who we are and have conversations. Figure out a way to make things better for the next generation so that our kids are making decisions based on good decision-making capability and not based on somebody driving an agenda in their mind. Help them make decisions. Don't force them to believe what you believe. Hope this video is useful to you. Consider your own life. What's your relationships look like? Are you providing stability for the next generation? Are you helping them make better choices? What does that look like? Regardless of where you came from, what you're feeling right now, what your current situation is, can you do in the next 24 hours to start moving you down a path that you can be that anchor for generations after you, just as my parents have been for our family. Hope you guys have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your 4th of July. And between now and next time we talk, please stay out of trouble.